just do it before you die. What personally will be your legacy?
What does it take to turn one voice, one story into a full blown out theatrical experience that captivates the audience? And how did the Marsh become the mecca for solo performers in the Bay Area? Well, today we're going to find all of that out because I am talking to the one, the only Stephanie Weisman, owner and artistic director of the Marsh Theaters in Northern California. If this is your first time here, my name is Lydia Nicole, and this is Acting Smarter Now. My first question for you is, when should an actor who is working on their one-person show come to you as a theater owner to say, I want to mount my show?
Well, first of all, there's two options, right? So the first thing you do, I mean, you can go through all the different classes and Monday Night Marsh, but basically an audition for a run is through a Marsh Rising. Because I don't really want to look at a script or video. I want to see the person perform it, because that's the way I find you can really see what the show is and how good it is and what help it needs.
And what does that look like? The Marsh Rising.
So people apply, and then we say yes or no, and we try to say yes as much as possible. And it's a one night only show of a full length performance. So over the years, David Ford has been the most, prolific director at the Marsh. And so what he tells his people to do, depending on who they are, is he tells them to go to Fringe Festival, get their work really done before they do this audition, because basically you have a chance to do an audition at the Rising. And I'm going to say pretty much I like it or I don't like it, or I think this is what you need to do to take it to the next level. And if that happens, because we'll do another Rising, which probably won't be public. It'll be with whatever changes that I've suggested and whatever development that has occurred over whatever number of months since they did the Rising, that just kind of normally occurs if you're actually working on your show. But we don't want to use up all their audience. So I'll watch the show again and then say yay or nay.
Let's talk about that. The not wanting to use up their audience. How important is it for a solo performer to come to you with an audience?
Holy moly, it is really important, and there's different levels of audience. So there's audiences like for Robert Townsend, which are national and universal, and people come fly in from Washington, D.C. to watch it. And then there's audiences like for people like Marca Gomez or Dan Hoyle, who have been working at the Marsh 20, 30 years, so that they have built an audience. And then there's kind of the new people who have their friends and associates and all that. And, and that's their audience. But part of the Rising process is to help the performers not only understand what aesthetically and artistically they will need to run at the Marsh, but what kind of business partnership it is, because we're partners in this, and neither of us can do well without each other. So that Rising, they better fill that audience up, because if they can't fill, and we don't promote it, we promote it very little, and that's the rule, because if they can't fill up that, how the heck are they going to fill up weeks of shows? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of maybe a little bit more than what you were asking for.
No, this is what I'm asking for, because I think a lot of people think, okay, I wrote the show, now I'm going to get in the theater, and now that's it. For me, a one-person show it's deceptive, because it says one person, but it really takes a team. And you, the performer, need to bring everything you can business-wise to the show. You've written the show, you've rehearsed the show, you got a director. Now you also have to become the producer. So you're wearing a lot of hats. And as the producer, you have to figure out how you're going to bring in the audience, how you're promoting it, how you're marketing it, and how are you selling the tickets. And you talked about a partnership with the actor. Walk me through what that looks like, because I don't think actors really think about partnerships. They don't, they just think, okay, I got a show. You're the Marsh Theater. Give me a chance and I'll show you how fabulous I am.
And goes to an audience of three. So, yes, it's really, and it's not just solo performance, it's everywhere. Remember what it was like when someone published a book? They had the whole publishing company behind them and doing so much for them. They probably didn't do as much as they have to do now. It's a whole different world, from solo performance to plays to everything. And the kind of the business machine behind it. So at the Marsh, I feel like there's three basic, kind of plugs, right? There's the art. There's each person's technical ability to produce and make that art go, as in terms of the performance. And then there's the business part of it. And it takes all three of those things to be really successful, unless you're the one in a million kind of Hollywood level celebrity that just walks on stage and everybody's just going to say, whoop, whoop, whoop.
Well, no, because even that requires promotion, marketing, getting your fans to support what you're doing. So it doesn't matter what level you are on, you still have to do all of the work. You still have to check all the boxes.
Exactly. And, and it's a creative process too, that business end. It's like, okay, I have a show about racism. You have to go out there and find the groups and because we can do a little bit of that at the Marsh, but we're just kind of a little tiny mid-range organization that doesn't have a ton of money to do that kind of outreach, but we can support it, and we help to let people know what works and how to make it happen. And that's kind of where our role is. So yeah, it's, like, how far do you want to go? It's like talkbacks. It's like every night certain performers have talkbacks. Certain people don't. Each thing you have to look as an individual project that has individual needs to make it successful.
Yes. And the more you can layer into it, the better and more successful it will be. You just hit on groups. So if you're talking about racism, or you're talking about cancer, or you're talking about hard of hearing, that it's a smart idea for the actor to plug into those organizations like the Cancer Society or the Hard of Hearing Society or Braille Institute or those groups, and bring them in. I'll just say this because it just reminded me of when I was out there hustling with my show. And I did not only a one-person show, but I did stand-up. I had a group that I would do. And so we would partner with whoever the venue was. For us, it was the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factory, the Ice House. And so we would find groups that we could invite that would fill the seats. So our way of doing it was, hey, if you can bring 99 people into the theater, we'll give you half of our half.
Right. Exactly.
So you got to figure that out. You talked about 3 tiers. So I jumped ahead, but I want to go back to the development stage, because you also mentioned David Ford, who is a staple at the Marsh in helping artists start to form and visualize what their show is going to be. Because a lot of times actors think, I could do a one-man show, I can get up there, and they have no structure, they have no story, but they see it and they go, I could do that. So can you talk about the development of the one-person show as the Marsh works on the development?
Right. So say you're new to this, for instance. It even goes back to, we have so many volunteers who have an inkling that maybe they want to tell a story or they don't. And by the time goes around, they suddenly go, I want to do it. I want to tell my story. So what do? Actually, I can go back to someone much closer, my beloved late husband, who you would think would be the last person in the world to ever do a solo performance. Something happened to him, like he got into a fight over somebody started fighting him about a parking space. So much militaristic honor in his background, he knocked the guy out. And it was a really good thing because it turned out the guy was drunk and had a loaded gun in his car. So the fact that he knocked him out was actually intuitively the right thing to do, because that guy could have gone back to the car and shot him, right? So I knocked him up, and my darling husband ended up in jail. And because he had diabetes, they wouldn't put him in the local Berkeley jail. He had to go to, maximum security Santa Rita. So he ends up in jail overnight. And I can't say my husband was particularly empathetic towards people doing crime and things and what people's lives are. He came out of that jail for the first time in his life. I saw some empathy because he had to talk to these people and find out why they were in jail. And it was also hilarious because he was a contractor. They were saying, well, we can do your road work and we can do this. But they can't exchange business cards because they don't have anything. Anyway, he decides to do a performance, which I'm saying is crazy. He's never been in stage. But of course, he's been around me at this point for 25 years or 30 at this point. So he decides to do a solo performance. He takes a class with David Ford. So a class is really important because what you don't want to do is decide to do it and sign up for what we have this Monday Night Marsh, which is the first program we ever did. The Marsh was the Monday Night Marsh at a bar back in 1989. So before you do that, the last thing you want to do is like really fail the first time out on the Monday night, but you might not be able to pull it off. So the best thing to do is take the class first, get it ready. And what's nice about our classes is that part of the class is to do a short performance, a 15-minute performance. So you get the support of someone like David Ford, and also there's other people that teach like Joyful Raven. You get the support of someone who knows how to do this, who knows how to both open up your story and, equally as important, keep their hands off of it. They're not trying to steer it to make it into their own story because that's what they're so skilled at. That's really what their brilliance is finding the nugget of the story through giving you lots of time during a 12-week class to improvise it out, expand a little bit. Well, why don't you talk a little bit of, I think that's interesting. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that? Why don't you write a little bit more about that? So that's the first step. Take a class if you're interested, or go to an open mic if you're telling a story. Or we also have a story slam program now, Conundrum Chronicles. Go do a 5-minute story slam. Do these things and start to get yourself and your story out there. So you can see how it works. You can get whatever feedback that's happening that comes back to you, and you get your feet wet. And that's the first thing. Do a class. And then you can do the Monday Night Marsh, and you can do several Monday Night Marshes. And then when you're ready, because Monday Night Marshes are for short pieces. Then when you're ready, if you get a full-length piece and you work with a director. Some people don't need directors, but I would say most people do. And because they're not as skilled as, say, Robert Townsend or Don Reed. They haven't been on stage for the past. They're baby on stagers. And so you work with a director, so you have some relationship with someone who's. I remember, I've written a few plays now, and I remember David Ford. I've worked with David Ford on these things, not in a class, but alone, just because, that's the place I should be, is a class with a bunch of people that want me to book them. Anyway, so, I work alone with him, and he just sits there, and he's on his iPad, and he doesn't even look like he's paying attention. And one day, he's like this with me, so much attention. And I was like, wow, he must really like this. And I get done. He said, "What are you doing?" Of course, he was nicer than that. That is also, it was kind of like that attention was not because he liked it. It was because he couldn't, it was so far afoot of what I had been doing. So, you get that kind of feedback where you're like, that's maybe another show, or whatever, And from there, then maybe you do a Rising, or you go to Fringe, you get a show out there, you go to Fringe festivals, whatever, to get your show in shape. And then you may come to the Marsh and do a main stage premiere.
Or you take your show to schools or hospitals or organizations that they have a little stage area where you can perform it for the people to get feedback before you decide to put it on its feet. And I would add to the class, because I think it's misleading that someone thinks that because they do a 12-week class, they are ready to mount their show.
Oh, no.
Because the one person show is all about writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And then when you start performing it, it's more rewriting. And that's the thing that I think actors need to know when they are getting ready to do a one-person show, that it's organic, it's alive, and you really have to work on the details of the writing to really have it all in place, because you're asking somebody to sit and listen to you alone for at least 60 minutes to an hour, to an hour and a half, or a 2-hour show, depending on how long the story is. You better nail all those beats. You better be ready. You better tell a compelling story and be okay with the process that it goes as long as it goes for you to get it. I wish someone had told me that 30 years ago when I first started doing working on my show. I remember I worked on it for a year, and I remember crying because my director said, we got to do another rewrite. I said, how many rewrites do we have to do? And I was very fortunate because I was a regular at the Comedy Store that Mitzi Shore would let me do the show every week. We had a deal. I could do my show, and then I had to host Latino night right after. So that was the partnership we had. I could do the show at 7, and 9 o'clock I needed to start the comedy show. And I was working on it for almost a year. And I remember having a little meltdown with my director when my director said, we need another rewrite. I was like, what are you talking about? Another rewrite? I can't do another rewrite. I thought this was going to make me a star. And that's the fallacy. Sometimes we see a show like Don Reed or Robert Townsend or a Spalding Gray who helped you say, I want to do that. We see people who, when they put it on, it looks flawless. But we don't know how much work they put into it, how much rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And even when it goes up on its feet, they're still rewriting.
Right. And they come, and depending on what your skill set is, as you come to this, you had a comedy behind you. Robert has what he has behind him. Don Reed has what he has behind him. This is, 50 years or whatever, 40, 50 years of this work already that maybe makes it faster to actually put the beginnings of their show together. But it's all that accumulated skill set that individual performers might have. And right, it's not one class. It's one class and you get to do a Monday night Marsh. And then you go from there. And, lots of students take multiple classes. Over the years, the community we've developed has been really interesting because back then people just worked with the director, whatever, but way back when. So we're almost 36 years old. And then we started something called the Performance Initiative, which actually came from me being a grad student at the University of Buffalo, SUNY Buffalo, where I was the editor of an arts journal, and I didn't know how to put out an arts journal. So I decided, because of my graduate assistantship, I could put a class together in small press publishing. And this class, I had a mentor, Robert Creeley, which many people may know, a really famous American poet who had done a lot of editing. And I worked with him for 3 years, learning about how to be an editor, which is directly about how I am an artistic director. Everything I learned there was an artistic director. So anyway, this class was a model for me starting the performance initiative. But instead of it being theater, instead of it being publishing a book or a calendar or poetry or whatever, it was making a piece of theater. And this initiative started with, and for me, it was always about business. So depending on funding, we always do 2 lines that it's like, it can be a 6 to 9 month performance where people meet every week and they already have a show, right? And we just develop the show every week. But each month we have a different business aspect. So 1 month is marketing, 1 month is technical theater. And we bring in guest speakers to teach the people in the initiative how to do these things, as well as so that they could do it for the initiative, because it culminates in a festival. So we would write the press release together, but each person then could write about their own piece, so they'd be ready with all the information from their own piece after it was done. So this is, out of that came, which was the surprising things. We knew the shows would come, and we hoped, and they were always very, very good with this kind of help. But what also happened was the next generation of directors came out of it. So the next initiative, we had more younger directors like Wayne Harris, Rebecca Fisher, Mark Kenward. All these people started to help direct us in this. They became directors because of it. So this is kind of how this model expanded to encapsulate more people and more people working with other people than just the director. And that expanded to like acting coaches, vocal coaches. There's this wonderful community where I'll go see this person that's developed over the years because of how the length of what we're doing, but just kind of organically developed. So people would say, I need an acting coach, or I need a vocal coach, or I need a physical, I need to block better, I need a physical theater coach, or whatever it might be. And it just expanded the support the community itself gave to the people developing the work.
Stephanie, there's a book here. This is a book that I'm just saying to the writer, Stephanie, this is a book. Is that something that you still have going on in your theater, the performance initiative?
It takes its different forms. It's never completely gotten it, because my biggest vision was to not only give people that there's 2 lines. One was the people that want to be producers and marketing, and they hook up with each one of the, say, 6 or 7 solo performances we're developing. They work together on it. Never got that far. We never got enough funding or whatever. But we've had many, many initiatives, but they're not always the same. The latest one we had was last year. It was called In Front of Your Eyes, and it was supporting the development of women's work. And the reason for that was because I was watching the Risings post-COVID, or still COVID, but post-shuttering, and seeing that for some reason, the women's shows needed more development after their Risings than the men's shows. I don't know why. Things cycle through. So I said, let's do this performance initiative just for women's, or women's plus, gender plus. So we just did a women's festival. And it was so interesting because, and this was an example of, there were shows in Risings, and most of the people that came into it had done a Rising. There were more, but most of them were Risings. And I said, look, in this initiative, I saw your Rising. Your show was 80 minutes at the Rising. I said, it's it's a little, I didn't say floundering, but that's what it was. There's too much space in here. You're going all over the place. And you need to cut it. It's a festival, and you need to have a 60-minute show. And this was one way to easily cause the cutting of that particular show that needed to be cut. And so people came into this initiative, and some of them did what I said, and they cut it. And so interesting because, there's performers that are performers and they've had a life in the arts, but then there's the performers that are so far from having a life in the arts and acting ability and things like that. So, and to use, for example, it's Pearl Ong's Night Driver. So Pearl Ong is in her 70s. She's never done a solo performance before. She's an immigrant from Hong Kong who was rich, and they lost all their money, moved to the United States, LA, and they had people that cook for them, people that clean for them. And they're in LA in a little apartment. They don't know how to cook. So each night, one of the funniest lines are, they're making TV dinners because they don't know how to cook, at least at the time. I think they learned to cook. But at the time, they were skillless in terms of that kind of homemaking because they never needed to do it in Hong Kong. So anyway, here she is. She comes over. She's an immigrant. She ends up a taxi driving lesbian.
What a great
One
show.
of the funniest line is, I wanted to be different from my mother. I think I went too far. And so she's someone, I said, cut it to an hour. And she did. And the show blossomed. It started to blossom because she has this amazing timing. She's not a great actress, right? But she's got this amazing timing and this amazing story, right? So she did it. She sold out most of her shows. Oh, no. She had a Rising. So then, because it did so well, forgot a point here, Lydia, I gave her a run, which she just closed, and she sold out all of her shows. Now, it wasn't like a 3-day-a-week run like Robert Townsend. It was a 1-day-a-week because things are different now. One day is about what you can do. And it did so well. Normally we extend shows that do so well. It turned out she had, and I talked to her, I said, do you want to extend? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, she said, but I have to do these things. I said, well, you have a couple months before we put it back up. And I looked at her and I didn't look at her on the phone. I talked to her and I said, Pearl, your show is fantastic. I said, but for some reason you start to circle when you're talking on stage and your voice goes up and down. I said, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to keep this going? I mean, you're in your 70s, right? Do you want to keep this going? She's like, yeah, I really do. I said, I would suggest you can, before you do your extension, let's go with an acting coach. Go work on your vocal stuff. Why not keep evolving this? You're a gem, but you don't have these skills. Go ahead and get them. And you're retired and you have time and you must have a little bit of money. So go ahead and let's continue to evolve this show. So I don't know where we started, but that's kind of where, one aspect of what happens with this particular initiative that was about women. And then and the other women that were in the show, we've given runs to the ones that I thought should get them. But always with the initiatives, the later initiatives, the more recent ones, I should say, we always pair the full-length shows with the shorter shows. So what it allows is for us to find our new round of full-length shows by looking at and supporting the shorter 15-minute shows that open the longer shows during these festivals. And we've been doing that for years.
That's awesome. So there's the development portion that you nurture at the Marsh. Then the next step is they get 1 day a week, or they get a shot to put up their whole show. And then if it's good, they get another shot to do it again. You just said that now, as opposed to before, you do one show a week for that person, not the run, like a whole run, unless it's someone like Don Reed, Robert Townsend, Marga Gomez, people who are going to fill the seats.
Absolutely, because it's sad in terms of development, because people need to have stage time, and 1 day a week is really hard. You never get going on it, but there's no audience. If there's no audience, this is the post-COVID world. As we hopefully get more and more audience back, and I think we are starting to. And Robert Townsend's show did great 3 days a week. But someone like Pearl Ong, 1 day a week is appropriate. Dan Hoyle, who could do 3 or 4 days a week, is doing 2 days a week, even though he sells them all out and he does great. And he runs it for, I think this last show is closing next week, for 8 months, right? Previous shows he's run for a whole year. And he could fill 3 to 4 days a week in past years. But right now, it's just different. It's just a different environment. So that's why the 1 day a week. Now, I did my own show, which was a 3-person play, which is about the end of life option. And I did it with 2 other actors that were equity actors. So it was me and the equity actors, the good ones. And I ran it 3 days a week but I knew it's like getting people. If I did it one day a week, I would have sold out every week. 3 days a week, I'm not selling out. Plucking each person. I mean, I wrote individual letters to everybody. I mean, I have talkbacks every night. I have worked so hard to get people into that show. And I did it for 3 weeks because it was a play. And I knew that I needed the development and the play needed the development over 3 days a week. So I have to say, I gave myself that little thing to hang myself on, but I did it for a reason and I did it knowingly. And so when I talk to performers who want to, perform new shows, I say, look, I suggest 1 day a week. We could do maybe 2 days a week. You could go to 2 days a week, but let's look at the times and see what's going to make you feel successful. It is very hard to perform to an audience of 20. Very hard, unless it's a very small closet.
Listen, let me tell you something. I learned early on how to perform for an audience of 2. So I think 20 is fabulous. No.
But you do know it's different. It's different.
Very different. It's very different. And you work so hard that when you work so hard and you don't fill the seats and you don't get an audience, you feel like a failure. And that is something that actors need to know. It's almost better to have one night a month and know you're going to fill all those seats so you walk away feeling accomplished, especially if you're putting up all that energy and you're working so hard and you're investing in not just time, but money, manpower. You want a full house. There is nothing like being able to do your work in front of a full house, not for 2, but for a full house. Because
absolutely,
2 people, all they keep thinking of is, can we leave? Can we get out of here? Is she looking at us?
Or why is it anything like going to a restaurant with one person? Oh my God, was there food poisoning here?
I totally agree with how you are working it. Let's talk about you as a business person. We're going to jump around here because you have so much to share, and I want to make sure I get every little morsel from you today. But I want to talk about, you are an artist, but early on, because you are an artist, you saw the need for space for artists to perform, because you started out in poetry and you wanted a place to do your poetry, which I love, but there weren't any available spaces for you to be able to do it. Can you walk us through how your trek to Northern California started?
So I'll tell you the very first thing. I was on I was at SUNY Buffalo in Buffalo, which is a place I loved, by the way, but for many reasons decided it was time to leave. This is back in the late 80s, right? Or mid 80s, actually. So I decided to go on a little trip. I'd finished graduate school, undergraduate. I was there from Buffalo the whole time. And Buffalo's a great art place, by the way. And especially then, I don't know if it is now, but I bet you it is. Anyway, so I decided to take a trip and I went to Santa Fe where my sister was. And that was really nice. And I went to Colorado where a friend of the family was. And then I went to San Francisco where I had a friend. And when I was in San Francisco, I went to see Spalding Gray performing Swimming to Cambodia. And as you said, I had just finished my master thesis, Dance Masters. Okay, it was a long poem. I see him and I'm like, holy moly, I love this. And I have to be perfectly honest with you, I was never thrilled with theater on the whole. And I was like, I love this. And it was 2 parts. So I had to come back a second night and I had to be in the front row. And this is kind of interesting because those who know the solo performance genre know how important Spalding Gray is and how famous he became.
And can you tell the audience who doesn't know Spalding Gray how he set the stage? Because he had a very specific way that he performed his one-person shows.
Like stagnant. He sat at a desk and he had a map of Cambodia behind him and he just talked to us. He just talked to us. Now, he was a very fine actor too, but He didn't move. That was his, at least I don't think that's the only one I've ever seen of his. He just sat there. I don't think he moved in any of them, but I don't actually know. So whatever. You think I would have researched this? Maybe now. I never even thought to. Anyway, I just was like, I had to be in the front row. And the front row, which was right behind where I was, right? They were all like cordoned off for press, right? He becomes one of the biggest stars around, right? No press show up. I get to jump over into the front row. Just think about that. No press. For all the solo performer wannabes, no press even came to his darn show. Maybe it was even his opening. It was all cordoned off. No one showed up. So even Spalding Gray had to deal with these problems. So I go to the front row. I see it. I'm like mesmerized. I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. So I go back to Buffalo and I decide, but during this trip, I had won a New York State Council on the Arts grant to read my poems around the state. And so I came back and I said, okay, I'll do this residency around the state and I will finish it with my own solo performance. I will do Dance Masters as a solo performance. Now, I don't know anything about theater. Now, maybe I know things now. Maybe I even have like comparable to a PhD. I didn't know anything, but I knew how to promote for whatever reason. So I went to the print shop, which you had to go to back then. It was work to print things back then, lay it out with little strips of white paper, blah, 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 blah. I go to the print shop to pick up my postcards. She looks at me and she says, the salesperson says, so what are you doing about lights? And I said, what are you talking about? And because it was a poetry, they rented the theater for this, but nobody said, go tech, what's your tech, what's this, what's that? So luckily she ended up doing my lights. I knew nothing. So that was, that became my going away party, and I ended it with a dance party. So it was my going away party, and I filled it up, but it was only one night, Lydia, only one night. So I decide I go then to California and move, which I think to San Francisco, but I actually moved to Berkeley. And I decided I wanted to do my solo performance. And I also knew at that point, I got my lesson. I didn't know anything about what I was doing. So it's like, well, what do you do? So at that time, way back, this is 1985 or 86 at this point. I think Brava had a once a year, twice a year women's that you had to audition for. I auditioned my Dance Masters there, and the feedback, I didn't get in. There's like 100 people in line, like 6 people got it or something. I didn't get in. And I said, well, why didn't I get in? They said, your piece was too iconoclastic. I was like, what does that mean? I was like, well, is this a nice way to say you didn't like it? Or do you actually mean that? And then why wouldn't you look iconoclastic? But whatever. So I then got a poetry reading where I read my next big poem, which was called Aphrodisia, at the lab, which was on Divisadero at the time. And I wrote it to me, my friends, which was a year, like 23 of my friends and 2 of the other person's friends. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to read from my friends, I'm going to have a party. Now, that other woman has been nominated for a National Book Award. She's gone far with her writing, with her only 2 people. But I said, I want to make it easy. I need to learn and I want to make it easy. So I ended up starting a 1 night a week performance series called The Marsh, because I had lived on a marsh in Delaware Bay. And it was the most fun, so much life on the marsh with an artist who taught me all about it. Anyway, so I start this 1 night a week series at the Hotel Utah. And on Monday nights, because that's what everybody said, even though it doesn't matter for solo performance, but that's the night people don't have to act in theaters. Hardly anyone who acts in theaters does solo performance, but whatever. So anyway, we start the Monday Night Marsh at this Hotel Utah, and it's amazing, so much work. Every night's it's still the same Monday night. Every week, 4 nights, 4 performers perform basically, generally. And they go twice a month because I wanted people to have more than a chance to do more than one a month. But then I was like, we went through Monday Night Football at a bar. It was like, I can't go through another Monday night. So we moved to Morty's in North Beach, which has been a number of things, including Corridor, a nightclub, who at one time, Lenny Bruce and Sarah Vaughan, this cavernous space for this little solo performance series. And we were there a while. This is right after the earthquake, so it was in '89. So then we moved to Valencia Street and went from 1 show a week to 7 to 10 shows a week in our full-time space and our first location on Valencia, which is now Cafe Ethiopia. We got closed down for a building code violation. And then we moved somewhere else. And then we moved into the space at 1062 Valencia, which was a jazz club called Beijing's. And we moved in there full time. And that's when everything expanded. You know, we moved in there, what year was it? I think 94 or something, or 92. And we just expanded, you know, in that space to 500 shows a year, 300 to 500. It's about 350 shows a year there.
Now you moved into this new space. It is blossoming. It is doing very well. This is the space you buy.
Right.
What made you, because I'm listening to your story and I'm going, okay, she was a poet who just wanted somewhere to work out at. And now she's inviting other people to come and work out with her. That's not enough. She gets booted out of one place, goes to another place, gets booted out of that place. Now she's in another place. Now she's going to buy this building. What made you say, I'm going to buy this building?
It's crazy, right? The problem was I wasn't doing all this was for me, right? It was based on what my needs were. And of course I wasn't doing anything. It turns out I had a decent business sense and my math skills, which are very low level, but very good at the low level.
Now, did you have a day job at this time while you're doing this?
You are looking at one of the first, if not the first, desktop publishing teachers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I remember I turned that class into publishing, and what was missing was what the desktop publishing world allowed for you to do everything yourself. So I was teaching desktop publishing, you know, as a contractor. I didn't have a job or anything, but it was cheap. I had cheap places at the time you could do that. And I didn't need to have a lot of economic needs at the time. So I didn't have a job, but I did that. I was a teacher, desktop publishing teacher. So yeah, no, that's what I did. It made enough to have my cheap apartment in North Beach, which is where I was at the time. And it was cheap. What my business sense did was I was good at this, and I was good at understanding buildings and development. You know, no training. I just happened to have it in me. And I like to problem solve. And apparently I really like to start programs. I started one when I was in 6th grade as a safety patrol. That was my first program. I just found a need. The kindergartners needed to move. Why were they standing in the hallway? And I think this is really important, actually, to my development. I went to the office and I said, why are those kids standing there? Why don't we take them to the classroom? and the principal said, go ahead, do it. So from that art, unfortunately, wasn't that supported. But this part of it was like, go ahead, do it. So my very first idea, I just had it. And they said, go do it. And I did it. So I think I got that in my system. Anyway, so we're in this building and we were becoming a nonprofit at that time. We weren't even a nonprofit. And we had this lawyer who did the lease for the 1062 Valencia space. And I didn't even ever see this in the lease. It said that we had right of first refusal to buy the building if it was being sold. Mm-hmm. And this was at the bottom of the market. Our annual income was $160,000 at the time. It was ridiculous. But we had already moved like 4 times. I looked at the neighborhood, and for some reason, because at that time, Valencia Street was not what it is now. It was not great. But the parking, and this is my reasoning. I remember my reasoning. The parking lot, which is on 22nd Street, close to the Marsh, was being changed over by the city. And instead of it being a really scary place to go with meters in it, it became a public attended parking lot. And I said, I think we should stay here. And the building, and it was owned by the Linoleum and Tile Workers Union, and they just sold it. What a mistake that was, at so cheap. And their realtor knew a friend of mine, so they helped us for 8 months to buy that building. He helped not sell it, I think, right, wow, to somebody else. And we had right of first refusal, but I can't imagine that would last for 8 months. And during those 8 months, I had to get 4 freaking loans to buy that building. And it worked out, even though everything could have gone wrong. Even to the last minute. We almost lost it. And we got the building for a, less mortgage than 1/10 of what it would cost us to rent the place.
Wow.
So in the beginning, we were only in the theater. And when we bought the building, we then ended up with this magnificent second floor. Like, it used to be the Italian Social Club. It was their ballroom. And we had all these other little spaces for offices and all that, which we then expanded into. So that expanded our programming tremendously, including starting a youth program, which has been very huge and successful. We were teaching in 20 San Francisco Unified public schools, after school and camp programs. So it's all because of the building. It allowed us to expand into it.
So now you have this building in San Francisco. When did you say we're going to expand to Berkeley?
Well, once again, it's all self-involved. So that second long poem I wrote called Aphrodisia that took place on Delaware Bay, I don't know, the blue, I decide that I'm going to take this poem that I wrote back in, 86. I'm going to take this poem and sing it. It made no sense. And I sang it into my tape recorder, the poem. And then I decided, well, now I'm an arts administrator. Why don't we see if I can do something about this? So I started contacting composers/arrangers to take my melody, because I have no skills to write or notate, would take my poem and turn it into a multi-arts piece for opera. And I found a wonderful composer, Ellen Hoffman, who we worked really well together. And she literally listened to me. I swear this is coming back to this. She literally listened to every note and notated every single note of that poem. I'd sing it to her and she'd do it. She ended up making this piece for a 4-person chamber ensemble, a woman's chorus. It ended up being a 20-woman's chorus that we partnered with, and a solo performer and a dancer. And we wrote this piece, and it turns out that chorus wanted to do it in the East Bay for their annual season. They did it as part of their annual season. And Ellen's friend ran what was then a jazz club that was in the, if you come to the cabaret, that you've sat in. It was called Anna's Jazz Island. And she ran that. And she knew about this theater that nobody was doing anything with. And there was all these cultural use things and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, let's do Aphrodisia there. So that's when we opened it. Now, I think Don Reed was the first performer, but Aphrodisia happened some months later. But that's how we got to Berkeley.
First of all, let me just say this, because as I was doing my homework on you, I came up with some words about you. You are creative. You are a performer. You are a poet. You are a journalist. You are a journal editor. You are a writer, producer, theater owner, director, author, opera composer, which makes you fearless, tenacious, bold, resilient, trailblazing, powerhouse, and unstoppable. I just want you to know that it has been so much fun getting to know about you by watching certain things. And the fact that you have been able to not have one, but 2 theaters that are solo theaters, and to keep them going for over 35 years, to me is quite a feat. And you remind me so much of Mitzi Shore, the only other woman I know who was such a badass, who would stand up to anybody at any time for any reason. You remind me so much of her in your spirit. I mean, you guys different, but your spirit, your tenacity to say, I'm doing this. What I take away from it is you are a woman in a man's business, or at that time, you starting it, it was really men. It's like Mitzi. She was the only female doing comedy, running the show, telling people what to do. That's pretty amazing. That is, especially, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even now, it's not as, we should have more women doing stuff, but you really are a trailblazer in that you not only took the challenge, but you have stayed the course. I love that because you are an artist, and because you are an artist, you figured out the business model. And to me, you are a model for how artists should be, because if we are professionals, we need to know the business. So I just wanted to tell you, as I was doing my work, I was like, oh, this is a badass woman, and I need to just honor her about what she has done. You know, you come, you do this stuff, and listening to you today talking about all these initiatives that you have done, and I know how difficult it is to have a nonprofit, and to have to get all these grants and to figure out where you're getting the money from, because it is hard work. And what you do is really hard work to keep the business going, day after day, year after year.
Wow. Thank you so much for that acknowledgement of me and looking at it in that way, because that's very nice and important. And you're doing all these great things. And I'm so glad that we met.
I am too. Here's what speaks to me as a woman, as someone who started. I was very fortunate in that I started in entertainment at 13 years old, working at a radio station. That was in the 70s. And seeing how difficult it has been for women over the years, I don't take it lightly when I see a woman who is really winning, because you are winning. I know you have your ups and downs, but let me tell you, Stephanie Weisman, you are a winner, because a winner gets knocked down, but they keep coming, they keep coming, they keep coming. And to hear your story and then find out that you went through cancer, and you kept the theater going, you kept everything going. That's quite a feat in itself. Let alone you got two theaters going for 35, 36 years. To me, you are incredible. So I just want to give you your flowers, because it's not easy. If we look at what the pandemic did to ravage theaters across the country, there's a lot that had to shut down because they couldn't sustain. And somehow you manage to sustain and continue. And your theaters are such great places for creativity and artists to grow and be and do. And you made a comment about theater is respite and revolution. And I think that is who you are. You are respite and revolution. So I just wanted to take this moment to say that. And the fact that you got the James Freeman Award from the San Francisco Bay Area Theater Critics Circle. That's a big deal. So, I want to give you your kudos, because you are.
Thank you.
You are kicking butt. You are kicking butt.
Thank you.
Tell me about you having cancer made you create a show.
Right. Of course. Why not? You got to have your interesting parts of your life. So how I kept it going. All I know is I have the support of my husband, thank God, at that time. And, it's like you find out you have cancer. It's shocking, especially since you run, you walk, you eat well, you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't do any of the stuff that supposedly is going to bring you down, but it doesn't actually matter in some cases. I got cancer like my mother did, but 2 years earlier, a different kind, but 2 years earlier than she even did. And she smoked and she didn't exercise. She didn't do. And I look like my father, which really got me. I look like my father, and he lived to 92 cancer free. So I'm like, huh. So anyway, I had uterine cancer, endometrial cancer, and it meant that I needed to, it's interesting because I needed to have a hysterectomy to get rid of the cancerous parts. And it was supposed to be slow growing, and they weren't worried about it. And I was at Kaiser, right? And I was furious that they were going to make me wait that long. And so, you find out being an executive director gives you the skill set to deal with the health, with health issues and conglomerates like Kaiser, where they're making you wait 6 weeks, and you're sitting there going, it's grown. I can't have this. This stuff has to come out. This has to come out. So I went to war with Kaiser about it. And I had a mediation and I met it. And it's like the people you meet, it's somebody who was the one who helps. She was so supportive of me and I won the mediation. And then you find out you don't know that you even won or what it means, but it meant that they had to do it sooner. They never told me that. So I started getting all these phone calls from the doctors and the nurses and all that saying why I should let it go and not do it right away. And I was like, wait a minute, because they were just trying to get me to say I didn't need them to follow this ruling. And luckily, because I didn't understand what was going on, luckily, I didn't say it. And finally, I understood. So anyway, I only got it a week sooner, but I did end up with a different doctor who was much better for me. This is going all over the place. So the hysterectomy wasn't so bad. It was laser and it was supposed to be slow growing. And it was supposedly that was the end. I was supposed to have a hysterectomy, but no, it had metastasized significantly to the lymph nodes around it. Not beyond that, thank God, but just to the lymph nodes, which means I could have treatment. And I had to have treatment, which was radiation. And my doctor was like, chemo's it's going to give you a 1% chance of living an extra year, but it's going to kill you in all different kinds of ways. So anyway, so it became a process. So I didn't have the chemo, I just had the radiation. And treatment, I think, I'm very glad now because I think I'm alive because I had the treatment. I mean, it would have been going all over the place. And, I'm scared I'll get cancer again because obviously I'm predisposed to cancer. And my mother got cancer 4 years later for pancreatic and died. So it didn't, it's not metastasis. It's more your genetics, whether they can, I don't have BRCA or whatever, but I still don't, they just don't know enough about it. So I just did everything I could as using both Western, which I wasn't thrilled about because the radiation really is awful. And what it does to you is awful. But I went to an acupuncturist that's a major cancer consultant. And so I changed my life a lot. He gave me a list of things. And he said, you do this, if you have time, Stephanie, to become a vegan and do Qigong, all these different things. And I basically gave me a list. It was brilliant. And it's been since 2018 now. So it's 7 years now. Over the 7 years, I have basically done almost everything he suggested, except for ongoing water fasting and learning to swim like a dolphin, which I perhaps was most interested in, but so far haven't done. But I became vegan partially, and I do Qigong, like I said, and I've changed my diet significantly and all these things. But running the theater during that time, so like the hysterectomy it happened and, a week later, 2 weeks later, I was pretty much back to somewhat normal. The radiation, however, was really hard. So basically, I just remember sitting upstairs during the radiation, and I had a terrible nausea response, which was the good thing was I lost 35 pounds, which I needed to do. And that was great. So I would just be sitting there running the Marsh from my computer and talking to people. And I remember maybe there was Zoom back then and doing Zoom staff meetings and just doing it, keeping it going, maybe at whatever low level it was. And I was not interested in letting people know. I didn't think it would help the Marsh to let people know, since I'm kind of like the sole proprietor of a nonprofit, which obviously I'm not a proprietor, but I did not believe that it would be a good thing to let the funders know I had cancer and all that stuff. I didn't let them know. The staff let them know. And I just kind of ran it remotely. It was like pre-COVID training.
And then you hit COVID. So you go from cancer recovery to COVID, and now you got to run it remotely again.
Which I like, actually.
So you go through cancer, you go through COVID, and then you lose your husband.
I know, isn't that lovely?
I'm just painting a picture here because this is a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. When did you decide you were going to do another show? Because you talked about doing a 3-person play, but then you decided to do a show about cancer.
Well, so I did the cancer show, a very short show that was before. It was called Planet Do Re Mi. And then after my husband died, I decided to do a show about the end of life, which is the 3-person show.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't know how, I mean, it's because I write, how do you get through things? For me, I have to do something. I have to write about it. So I started writing, actually, and this show was not so much of my own. It was the most found writing piece I've ever done. It was very interesting. So what happened was right before my husband died at the end of December. So in October, I get an email from the first volunteer at the Marsh, who I hadn't been in contact with. I don't get an email. I noticed that used to get, whenever we get a donation, I get a little email. And it said, this person, Shelly, had donated $500. And I was like, really? Why would she do that? That wasn't what she would do. And so, I mean, this is 30 years ago, she was a volunteer. I hadn't seen her in probably 5-10 years. And I look at the email and it says, I'm sending the donation because I used to volunteer at the Marsh and it was so important. And what your work is so great. And I'm dying of pancreatic cancer. So my husband is dying of pancreatic cancer and this friend is dying of pancreatic cancer. So I went to see her and she had become a psychologist and done a lot of work in this stuff after she knew she died, because there was no training for therapists to tell people that they were no longer going to be their therapist because they were dying in 6 months. So she did a lot of videos with UCSF. So I got these videos, I did interviews with her, and then I had my husband's story. And it just all came together, that I had this play. And with me in the middle of it, trying to stay stable and alive, and not, because caretakers are often die the next year or so, or before the person that they're caretaking for. Now, I have to say, my husband was not a hard person to caretake. He's very independent. Even if he couldn't move, he didn't ask me to do that. But, he was dying. It was horrible. So I did this, I guess. I put it together and I was doing Qigong because I became a Radiant Lotus Women's Qigong teacher during this period.
Wow.
After he died. So I do Qigong in the play and I would sing. And then I like emotional songs. So this Adagio in G minor, I like to sing, right? Because that's what I should have been, probably a singer. I was a little singer. God knows why I stopped. Every solo, 6 to 12, get peaked and plummeted at 12. So I started to sing again, and I started to sing this Adagio while I do the Qigong. And that's kind of how I get through the day, because I find even now, if I don't get up and do my Qigong and sing, I am less happy. Lydia, I am less happy. I find, it's surprising because I didn't do it a lot while I was performing as much or getting ready for it. And I was like, there's a difference in my emotional and mental health when I don't do this kind of meditative movement and singing, which allows me to grieve in a way.
Something I find interesting as I was researching you, even though you were a poet, as you've done these shows, you have really pursued proper training. Like when you were doing one of your shows, you talked about getting someone who composed your opera. You also talked about having a director from Spain who you worked with. And if that wasn't enough, you talk about having had someone to teach you ballet. Is it Wayne?
Oh my God, Wei Wang. He's a principal dancer at the.
Wei Wang.
He made a movie during COVID of Aphrodisia, and he choreographed me. I was choreographed and moved to one of the most brilliant dancers in the world. Like, it's unbelievable. I mean, that was just weird luck.
No, not weird luck. Your instincts are so spot on as an artist. Even though you are doing all this executive business stuff, your artist self is still intact, and you are able to do your stuff. As you were talking about how you dealt with the cancer, the COVID, your husband's dying, that you took care of yourself through your art. I think that is such an important thing as artists, no matter who you are, to make sure you continue the flow. And you just talked about the qigong and singing, and that you've tapped into how to center yourself as an artist to be able to do what you need to do throughout the day. And you are giving yourself good creative medicine. What a lovely, it's a lovely gift. And it's such a wonderful thing to share with the artists who are watching, to say, take care of yourself. What can you give yourself? How can you be kind to yourself? I want to ask you, what does it mean to you today when you perform than what it meant to you when you first started? When you first started doing poetry, you were an artist back then, but it was focused in a different area. And having worked with all these artists like Marga Gomez, Don Reed, Robert Townsend, Robin Williams, Kamal Bell, and the list goes on and on and on and on, you have taken a lot from these artists, have seen what works, what doesn't work. So what is being an artist for you today, as opposed to what it was back then when you wanted to do your poetry and you didn't know that you needed lights?
Well, when I was a poet, I did a lot of readings when I was a poet. My first reading was when I was 12 years old, which is why I think I ended up starting the Marsh, and we can not go into what happened. Horrible thing happened to me, which made, I was a singer. I sang all the time in public. Then I wrote this piece about racism when I'm 12 years old. My mother types it up, gives it to the rabbi, and I do it in front of an audience, but no one teaches me that I have to, they don't tech it. And I don't know that I'm not talking into the mic. No one set up the mic, and it was a disaster. And my mother did not handle it well. And all that came in, all that outward stuff I was doing without even thinking about it. Did I think about singing? No, I was just reading my work in front of 200 people. It just all happened. And then she stopped that bad experience with my mother. It stopped everything. So it's been, in some ways, it's been this journey of trying to figure out why with somebody who was like almost at a level of protege in terms of my singing, why did that stop? Why did that stop? So much of the Marsh, in a way, was I wanted to make sure that people had the tools and a venue that they didn't go out and screw up something and then have their mother or whomever kill their life, their artistic life. I wanted to give people the tools so they could do a good job. So it's really strange how I think that particular incident is at the root of what the Marsh is about and why I did it. Over the years, I've tried to figure out, how can I get back on stage? How can I get that energy out? How can I get my work out, which I was so freely doing when I was young, in the midst of whatever trauma that caused in me? And watching performers every day do it, seeing what it's like for them, how to support them. I've also gotten a lot of support back, about my own work. Just it's just becomes, it's part of me, I guess. It's this art of me wanting to do things and try things and be the very limited George Plimpton. I've even done that. I've had a photo exhibit. Lydia, you don't know about my photo exhibit.
I don't know about your photo exhibit. Why don't I know about your photo exhibit?
It's called Appalachia, Apples on the Go from Trinity County to San Francisco Bay Area. It's crazy, but I actually had a photo exhibit in Trinity County. And I'm like, it's this weird thing. Like, I don't know, like, it's about being around the arts as much as anything. It's about keeping that creativity alive in myself, in oneself, by seeing what other people are doing. Because also performance, you may or may not be someone who's going to do one or be an artist, but you're seeing either your life when you watch it because it's so intimate and authentic, or you're expanding. Oh, is that what life's like? That's what can happen to you? And this is what happened to me. It's not exactly the same, but this is what happened to somebody else. And how does that make your life more alive, in a sense, more vibrant, keep you not in your hole of yourself, right? How does your expand into, how does your whole own energy, your chi, so to speak, expand and meld with the world, the people and the environment, like, so I don't know if that answers it, but I think it's just, being, I have been allowed to be in connection and communication with amazing artists. I mean, that artist that I live with on Delaware Bay he's died, but a brilliant, beyond belief. The Smithsonian collectors of arts collected him. And I got to see what it meant to be an artist with him, like how he worked from sunup to sundown beautifully, his intent, his focus, his intellect about it, what he was doing, and how he gave that to me by living with him on that marsh for 3 months. So it's been this life surrounded by the arts, and what that means has meant to me, and what it means to anyone who, has that opportunity to surround themselves and be inspired by the arts.
Do you think that you having cancer back then, facing your husband passing and the volunteer passing, do you think that has stirred you up more as an artist to say, hey, life is short, I need to do this?
It does, because, in a way, I've got this opera that I think other people can do, or I can. So there's this thing about, do I have to do it myself? Or can I let go of it and let other people do it, and perhaps do it a lot better because they're actually more skilled than I am? Or they have that 40 years or 20 years of muscle to be an actor, which I don't have, right? I'll have different things than those people, but I don't have that 20 years of muscle. So, so so here I am, at my age, and I have a lot of work and I want to do something. And I've started 16 memoirs, I've started them, and I've got these stories. I'm like, well, just do it before you die. What personally will be your legacy? And it's not about it has to go to anybody else. It's about for myself.
That brings me to the artists out there who put their career down, they put their dream down. What could you say to them to get them to spark to say, you know what, I'm going to go for it again? Because sometimes people have these fantastic dreams. They start out, and like you did, you were on course as a singer, and then that experience just shut you down. And I know so many artists who were on the path, and then that one thing just stopped everything. But how it stopped you, you were able to then start finding how to release it again, how to live it again. So what would you say to that person who got shut down and years have passed, decades have passed, and to say you can still do it?
I think that what I actually ended up doing for me is I ended up being exposed to something called the Roy Hart Theater that works with psychological vocal things. And I did a workshop in San Francisco soon after I moved here. And then I ended up going to France, where they are stationed, and spending 3 months there. And my goal was to find out, why did I stop singing? And I didn't really understand it, because that's different than the writing with my mother. The singing was, why did I stop? And it took, because it happened there in France, that I found out that people were really jealous of me. They were jealous of my voice, I should say. And because it happened in France, it was like, oh, and the person I was working with, my mentor there, my teacher there, we both realized it, because his girlfriend was really jealous of me, and it was my voice. It wasn't the romance stuff. It was my voice. And why wouldn't they take me to the Mediterranean when I wasn't being a weird American. I was washing dishes to get through. They weren't washing dishes, right? And so I guess one way would be to do a solo piece, because it would allow you to focus on what happened and maybe release that cork that corked you up, right? And started. So I mean, that was what released me, and I'm sure. And what the other thing it did was it made me get my lower voice. I only sang really high, and they forced me to get my lower voice because I complained bitterly because after I did a workshop here, my neck went like this, and my neck hurt for months. So they never let me go to a high note for 3 months until the last thing. And the thing that happened when I did finally go to the last thing is I believed in future. Somehow, it's a weird story. I'm not even going to tell it, but it allowed me to believe in future as a trajectory of the past and the present. And that getting my body behind my ideas, because I was not that, I was more, because, and I got my body behind my ideas with my lower voice, right? That helped me, right?
What does that mean? What does that mean that you got your body behind your?
I was like all my high voice. Right. And good, not bad, but I couldn't do my low notes. And they knew and because it was a psychological thing, they literally would have me swing chairs around my voice, around my head, while Rossignol, the teacher, would be on my down part going, down, Stephanie, down, Stephanie, down. And by going down, I reached my lower notes in my voice. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what helped connect my head with my body. So I actually could do more. So this is that was my journey, right? That was my journey. And obviously everyone's going to have a different journey. But I think the way to, like I said, uncork it, I've never used that, is to do something art-y. Like I did this thing because of my voice, but a solo performance class can allow you to just explore your ideas and your thoughts and have a place and kind of a schedule to help you actually get something done. You got to do it. And it's going to be. And then the second part of that I want to say is that, we live in kind of a celebrity driven world, right? And if our expectations are to be a celebrity, like, of course you're not going to succeed. There's like 1 in a million that succeeds at the level of celebrity. And yet that's the only people we see succeeding most of the time. So like hardly anyone at the Marsh is going to succeed to the level of what I call Hollywood or whatever you want to call it. But why is, rethinking that instead of that, if that's your goal, that's kind of like a goal of becoming a gold medalist, which actually you have more control over than becoming a Hollywood success story, right? Becoming a gold medalist if you're skilled. You have more control over that, even in Hollywood, right? So, I mean, I would suggest that you look at how you feel about that and maybe just let go of that.
Another gift that you give to artists at the Marsh is that you have made it as a breeding ground for new performers and new performances. And that's a gift. That's a gift, because you just talked about the culture is all about celebrities. But celebrities aren't born, they're made. And they're made because people invest in them, because someone believes in their talent, believes in their ability, gives them the opportunity to develop. And what better way to develop than in theater, to get your chops, to learn to use your body and your voice, to learn storytelling, to learn how to work the audience, because there is something to be said about theater that you cannot get in film or television. That one-to-one, you wanted to see Spalding Gray up close and personal. And I'm with you, girl. When I go see theater, I want to be right up under their nose. I remember going to see Al Pacino. He spit on me. He was talking and his spit. I went, oh my God, I'll never wash my face. Al Pacino spit on me. And just seeing theater live. And I'll share this little story about solo theater, because I got to see Elaine Stritch do At the Liberty. She was here at the Amundsen, and I went with Robert to go see her. We went opening night. I was like, I don't know what the... And I was so mesmerized by her. I went every night for a week, because they had back at that time, the Amundsen had like $25 seats. So you could go, you could get online the night of the show, and if you were one of the first 5 or first 10, you could get a ticket to go in. So I went every night to watch this 80-year-old woman be brilliant on stage, be present on stage, give everything she had on stage. She taught, she was teaching how to be on stage as a one-person show. And I had seen a lot of one-person shows, but she was it. And what she gave to the audience, I feel, is that it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what illness is, because she was full-blown diabetic. She had to have shots every day. I mean, she had damaged her body, but you never knew it when she got on stage. And theater takes you into a whole different world. We need theater. You know, people have gotten a little crazy with social media, but we need live theater, and you give that to us. So I want to say thank you for that, because it is needed in our culture, especially right now with all the turmoil that's going on and all the uncertainty. We need a place to go to watch and to laugh and cry and enjoy and reflect and do all those things that only theater gives you. Only theater gives you, because you breathe with the audience. You're together with the audience. And I will say this other thing about the Marsh. You guys have the best audiences. I just want to say that. But I want to get to the real reason why I wanted to interview you, which was K-dramas. Let's talk K-dramas, because that's how we bonded, was K-dramas. I want to know, how did you discover K-dramas?
You know, I don't know what happened, but I watched my first one. And that was, you know, what do you call it? What's the drug? The thing you call a drug, the breakthrough drug, the whatever. That's not what, there's a word for it.
The thing that hooked you. That thing that.
So I watched Extraordinary Attorney Woo, which is many people's first K-drama. And I loved it. And then I was somewhere and I was saying, I like this K-drama to this guy. And he said, you know what? You're going to love Crash Landing on You. You're going to like it better. I said, no, I'm not. And I started watching it and I didn't like it better the first couple. And I was like, holy moly, I do like it better, even better. And I think it was because, and it kind of started to show me why I love K-drama so much. It's because I learned something about North and South Korea in relationship to a beautiful kind of love story, and God, the men are beautiful in these shows. They're just beautiful, and the women, I guess, are too. But for whatever reason, they don't. I don't think they're as beautiful. I think you said something about that. They make sure because women aren't more beautiful than the men. But anyway, in some cases, so I got that one, and then I just that was it. I started, you know, because it became my nighttime companion, and going through them, and I could, and then you find out, oh, I mean, these stories, they're not like what we watch on American TV. You know, I get to watch something that takes place in a museum. So there's the romance, there's the story, and then there's also the fact that I learned about what it's like to be in a museum or a book publishing company, or a lot of these K-dramas, especially in the beginning, they always had all these levels that really both emotionally and intellectually stimulated me. And I learned things. And so then I have to watch one every night before I go to bed. I have to. And the other thing is, because, I mean, you know, we're talking and, you know, I do a lot of things, right? So if it was something that was in English, I wouldn't have to stay there. I'd be doing this or that, you know, while I'm watching it, you know, I would. So it's like, my choice is to read captions. I don't want to hear English. I want to have to read captions because I have to sit there and be quiet. So even during, you know, sometimes during the day when I just have to be quiet, the only way I know I can make myself quiet is to put the K-drama on and sit there, because otherwise I'm never going to sit down, or I'm never going to lay down. I'm not going to rest myself. I'm going to be, you know, washing the dishes or whatever, calling somebody. And it's the only time in my life that I am condemned to being quiet, or a more positive term than condemned. What would be it's amazing because I am forced to be quiet. And so there's that. I just love them. And recently, I don't know, something weird came up with something and I was upset about it. And I watched a K-drama and I realized, regardless if they're the most brilliant K-drama or they're just kind of okay quasi, but they're good enough for me to keep watching, they make me feel better.
They do. They do. I've been watching K-dramas now for 8 years. And I have to tell you that I stopped watching a lot of American TV and even movies. Like the last 2 years, I don't think I've seen any movie that has been nominated anywhere, because I'm like, I can't. I got to watch my K-drama. Every now and then I get bullied into watching something American because they're like, you got to watch this. But for me as an artist, what I have loved, and I love watching international stuff and reading the subtitles, because early on in my development as an actor, I learned that how you can tell good acting is to turn down the sound and watch somebody's body language. And you should be able to tell the story just by their body language. So I started watching a lot of international movies and stuff just to see, is that real? Are they really telling you? Because you don't know what they're saying. And if you're not reading the captions, you are really looking at their bodies to tell you stuff between their bodies and their eyes. And we as American actors a lot of times are lazy. We work from here. We're not expressive. We don't tell the truth in our body. And so I love K-dramas. I also love the fact that they have a reverence for older actors. Like you could be an older actor and carry the K-drama, and I love all the tropes that they bring, the poor girl with the chai bowl. I love the horrible in-laws with with the girl who has to do everything for them, and all for love, and just the suspense of it all. I love that. So I am like you. I would rather get under my covers at 8 o'clock at night and start watching my K-dramas. And that makes me happy. I think that they have an excellent or they excel. When they're good, they are really good. The writing, the directing, the acting, it is just great. I remember watching one early on, and just the precision and the care that they did with the actor business, like putting marbles on the floor and the actor having to deal with all these marbles and trying to find this ring. I can't remember what show that was, but I was like, oh my God, how intricate is that? Wow. And it is always, I made a list of some of my favorites for you. The Guardian, it used to be called Goblin. I don't know why, but they changed the name to Guardian, the Lonely and Great God. Fantastic. Queen of Tears, another great one. They're not in any special order, but I just love these. The Heirs, It's Okay Not to Be Okay. Strong Woman Do Bong Soon, which is a wonderful comedy. Kill Me, Heal Me, very intricate, beautiful. She Was Pretty. The list goes on and on, but those were a few that I thought they deserve a mention. Korean dramas, comedies, rom-coms. I love their rom-coms. They take me back to the 30s and 40s. We had some outstanding rom-coms, like with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn and all these great old stars who really were believable in what they were doing. And for me, the really good Korean actors are very believable. I'll shut up now. But I could go on and on about K-dramas.
It's like, I'm like, sometimes I watch them and I'm like, I really think they're who they are. This is totally ridiculous. But this part of me is like, don't be. But then you gave me some suggestions before, which I'm so grateful for, because it's really hard to figure out which ones to watch, right? And as you get going, you start with Netflix, or I did, and then you're like, I got to go to Viki. I have to go to Viki.
Cocoa, and Hulu now has some Apple. What's interesting is Apple, they have Viki. You can watch some of their Viki stuff.
Yeah, and it's like I watched Heal Me, Kill Me recently because you recommended it.
Yes.
And I was like, talk about the acting gift of a lifetime to have somebody playing a multiple person. Unbelievable what that actor got to do with that show, because it's about multiple personalities and he has to play like 10. It's kind of like solo performance, because it's like it's a character playing so many different roles.
And he's a wonderful actor and she's a wonderful actress. That the two of them are amazing. And one thing that I will say in watching K-dramas, I usually go down the rabbit hole, because if I like an actor in something, I go, what else did they do? I gotta watch them. And what I like about Viki is that with Viki, which you don't have with Netflix, is they show you the actors, who the actors are, and then if you click them, you could see their body of work. So you can go from one thing to the other. I love that. It's like, okay, I didn't know about this.
I didn't know that. So you can actually look at the actor and click on a link.
Yes. If you click the cast and the episodes will show up. But if you click cast, all the prominent cast members show up. You see their picture and their name. And if you click them, it'll take you to their page. And then you click their work and it will give you what they've done. And so for me, that has been quite a rabbit hole. I have discovered so many Korean actors because of Viki, just clicking those. What else did they do? What else? Well, I like her. I like him. And then sometimes you check their work and you go, oh my God, they were in this. I didn't remember this.
Right, you don't even really? They were in all those shows. Now I'm starting to look at them going, oh.
You also see how they've blossomed, how they've come, like the guy who did the lead guy in It's Okay Not to Be Okay. And he's done a lot of work, but his early work, I was like, I didn't remember him. It's such a treat for me as an actor to be able to watch these actors and see how they go, and the ones who are older and they're so skilled and so beautiful. It's so beautiful to watch. Not to take anything away from American actors. I love American actors, but there's something to be said when I see Korean actors, British actors, Canadian actors. There's a level to their work, which is why I appreciate you so much, in that even though you're not doing one person shows all the time, that when you do, to go deep. You're not just gonna, okay, I wrote this show. Now I'm an owner of a theater, so I can put it up, because you could just say, I'm gonna put it up and do it. But that you have the foresight to go, you know what? I want to work on this. And I know that this needs a group of people to help me. I can't do this by myself. I love that, because having trained for many, many years, I know the value of training, the value of rehearsal, the value of rewriting. Even though I hated rehearsing when I was in my 20s, I hated rewriting. It's like, I have to rehearse this. But as you get older, you see how valuable the rehearsal process is, how valuable it is to have a director who has the vision of what it is or what it can be, and says, we're going to go a little further. We're going to go a little bit further. Come on, we can do this.
I can't figure out why I love shows like The Heirs, Boys Over Flowers.
Because The Heirs, Boys Over Flowers are all Lee Min-ho. That's his stuff. He also did the one, the Legend of the Blue Sea.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're not like these high school things. which are like the inheritor, the heirs, which I think they also call it the inheritors, right?
Yes.
And Boys Over Flowers. What? There's a third one. What's the third one? Whatever. But anyway, why for teenagers? Why do I like these shows so much?
Well, it's first love. It's first love. It's got a little Romeo and Juliet in it. It's got all these villains. You are rooting. They're so well written. You are rooting for these two lovers to come together. You know, everything is trying to keep them apart, and you're just rooting for them. And because they do such a good job acting wise, you're like, what? Come on. And they're emotional. I will say this about K-dramas. They can be soapy, but they can also be very emotional. Like you're watching and you're just, oh my God. Oh my God. I cried so, you know, there are a few that I've cried so much, and they're unpredictable sometimes. Because sometimes you have the main character die or be killed, and you go, wait a minute, that's not how it's supposed to go.
So, you know, like that one, which was about the guy who was in the heirs, the bad guy, right? The other one who falls in love with the girl.
Yes.
He did a role. I can't believe he was the same actor where
Yes.
he gets a brain tumor. He's a K-pop star, right? And he gets a brain tumor.
Kim Woo Bin. Yes.
What? That
Yes.
What was the name of that one with where he gets the
Uncontrollably Fond? Oh my God. Did you cry?
I can't even watch it again. I can't even think of watching it again. It was so horrifyingly emotional.
And the actress Bae Suzy, oh my God, the two of them, I cried and I cried and I cried. Sometimes I will go back, like Goblin is the Guardian, is the one I will go back to because I am so impressed at how they connect different genres. It's a bromance, it's historical, it's about immortality. It also is a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of romance, a little suspenseful. It's got everything, but it works. The script really works, and they just do such a marvelous job.
So there's that other one. So now what I've been doing is like I'm starting to. So I'm trying to learn Korean, although I haven't done anything since last August because of the play, and I haven't gotten back to it.
We gotta go to the Busan Festival in October. So
yeah,
I'm just
let's set it up because yes. So we should talk about it because I think I might have found a dog sitter, which is my biggest problem.
Okay.
So there's this K-drama book. Do you know about this K-drama book? It was a Korean student who did her PhD, and this is her dissertation, and she published the book. And so I've been like, you know, because I'm desperately, you want to find out what's good ones. It's just really hard to tell, especially by the titles, right? Like Uncontrollably Fond. Why would you think it would be so heart-wrenching? You would never think it was so heart-wrenching. So I've been, before I luckily talked to you about them, I was trying to find good ones. So I would go through the book and see what she suggested.
Okay.
Which I think the book should just be as her suggestions more than anything else. But one of them, and what's the name of it? She wrote was the one that stayed with her the most. And I watched it and it pretty much stayed with me the most. And the thing about it is what I've been listening to lately is because I like to sing these emotional songs, right? You know, so there's 20 episodes, I think. And in each episode, I don't know if it's when a character appears or a certain feeling appears, they play a snippet of a specific song. And I was like, I love the song. I love the song.
Oh, they have some of the best songs in those shows.
Well, this one just got me so much that and I hate to do errands, and that by that is to Google and figure out what the song is. And I found it, and I have been singing it in Korean ever since. Like it's a freaking 5-minute long song, over 5 minutes in Korean. I don't understand it. And it's really hard to learn something like by syllables where you have no idea what they mean. It's so the song is Snowflower. It's old and it's a little bit schmaltzy. So have you watched I'm Sorry, I Love You?
I did.
That was the most heart-wrenching K-drama I have ever seen. I know it was kind of, it's old. It's an older one, much
Mm-hmm.
and I know that it was a little schmaltzy in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my God, but that's, that I can't believe how it stayed with me.
They not only stay with you, but the characters stay with you. And you feel like you know them in a different way than watching, when I'm watching American television, I very rarely do I go, I love that character, and I bond. But for some reason, Korean shows, those characters I bond with, I go, oh my God, I
Oh,
need to know this person.
what is it in the Korean culture between the K-pop and the K-drama? Is it about this culture that is putting out this kind of,
Is it that because we don't know the language, we get sucked in to the story, and we see it without judgment, where when we're looking at American TV, I don't know about you, but I can get very judgmental. Oh, that actor, oh, what is that actor doing? But when I'm watching international projects, I don't always do that. If they're good, I get sucked in. I'm just like in it. My imagination goes. It's like reading a good book, right? You're reading a good book, your imagination is just going, and you want to share it with everybody. You've read this great novel and you just wanted to. And when Mary did this, oh my God, I really couldn't believe that Mary would do this. How could she do this? And that's how the K drama. Like sometimes I want to. My daughter gets tired of me because I go, well, in this K drama, she said, okay, could you just get to what happened? I don't need the story. Just tell me. But I have to tell you. And that's another thing. Watching K dramas, there's not a lot of people I can talk to about it. So, but I love that you have found K dramas. I love that it is keeping you company and it's making life a little easier as you go through your grieving and your transition and recovering your artist self in a different way. I love that you have the theaters and they're your day job and you do what you need to do. But what I love the most about you, Stephanie, is that you keep your art going, and you are a testimony for artists out there who have lost their will or lost their way as an artist and took that 9 to 5 job or took that gig that is paying them money to live or survive, but they lost their joy because they can't be the artist. And there's a lot to be said about, whether you have a day job or not, to keep refilling your creative well. The fact that you're writing operas, you're having photo exhibits, you're doing all these things, that's going to give you a long life because art feeds us. Art is medicine. And as artists, we give it out, but then there are times we got to take it in. We have to have the medicine for ourselves. So I am so grateful that I got to have this talk with you. I'm so grateful that I could share you with my community. I am so grateful that you are in Berkeley and San Francisco and that you help artists live their dream. You help them develop their dream, polish their dream, and live their dream. I thank you for being the woman, the powerhouse, the badass that you are.
and I thank you, Lydia, for saying these things and for having this podcast. And I've watched your other ones and they're fantastic. And it's been so great to be in community with you, with the Robert Townsend show, and now the K dramas. And I think I'm going to see if we need to talk about us going to Busan together.
That's right, Busan. Isn't Stephanie a powerhouse? I mean, she is amazing. It was so fantastic talking to her. If you are in Northern California, you owe it to yourself to go to Berkeley or San Francisco and attend a show at the Marsh. And since we're speaking of shows, let me know in the comment what you thought of this interview. And if you are so inclined, buy me a coffee. I would love a latte. Don't go anywhere because I got another great interview for you on one person shows. This one is the master of the one person shows, Mr. Don Reed.